Picture yourself walking down a street in Chicago in 1955. Every single man you pass is wearing a suit. Not for a wedding, not for a funeral. Tuesday morning. The man selling newspapers on the corner. Suit, the factory foreman walking to his shift. Suit, maybe a little worn at the elbows, but a suit. The delivery driver. The bank teller. The high school principal. The guy fixing the sidewalk. Men at baseball games in the bleachers, suits and ties, fanning themselves with their hats in the summer heat, not because anyone told them to. Because that was just what it meant to be a man in public. It wasn't formal wear, it was just what you wore to exist. Now flash forward to today. Walk into almost any American office and you will see hoodies in meetings, sneakers under dress pants, if pants are even involved, men running errands in sweatpants that have never once touched a gym. Even funerals, even job interviews, the suit has become optional. Sometimes even a little suspicious, like you are overcompensating for something. Something happened to the way American men saw themselves, and almost nobody can tell you exactly when it happened, or why, or who decided it should be this way. Here is a number that puts it all in perspective. In 1930, the average American man owned multiple suits and wore one nearly every day of his adult life. Today, surveys suggest a huge share of American men under 40 don't own a single suit at all. Not even one. Formal suit sales have collapsed by well over half since their mid-century peak, even as the American population has nearly tripled. We didn't just wear suits less. An entire way of being a man in public quietly disappeared. So how did the most image-conscious country on earth become the one place where a grown man in a suit on a random Tuesday gets a second look? That's exactly what we're answering today. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what the suit actually was. Not a costume for special occasions. Not something you pulled out twice a year and hoped still fit. It was the baseline. In cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York in the early 20th century, a suit was the minimum requirement for being taken seriously in public, regardless of your income. Photographs from the era show dock workers, train conductors, and shop clerks all dressed nearly identically to bankers, just in cheaper fabric. But to really understand what the suit meant, you need to understand one specific moment that played out in cities across America for about 100 years. A young man's first payday. He had been working for weeks, maybe months, saving carefully, and the first real purchase he made wasn't food, wasn't rent, wasn't something practical. He went to the tailor or to the department store on the good side of town, and he bought himself a suit. This wasn't vanity. This was a declaration. In a world where you couldn't post a photograph, couldn't display a logo, couldn't broadcast who you were through any of the channels we take for granted now, the suit was the only signal available. The cut of it, the fabric, the way it was maintained, these told the whole story of a man at a single glance. There were 3 reasons this system held together for so long. First, status signaling in a world with almost no other ways to display it. No social media, no brand logos, no expensive sneakers. Your suit, its cut, its condition, was almost the only visual language available to communicate who you were and where you were headed. Second, social conformity. Dressing differently from everyone around you wasn't seen as self-expression. It was seen as a problem. Something that invited suspicion, judgment, questions you didn't want to answer on a Tuesday morning. And third, and this is the one people always forget, there simply was no alternative category of clothing yet. Comfortable clothing, as we understand it today, weekend clothes. The entire concept of what you wear when you are not working barely existed as an idea for American men. You had work clothes for hard labor, You had the suit for everything else. There was no in-between. Here is what almost nobody mentions when they tell this story. The suit wasn't just about how a man presented himself to the world. It was about what he communicated to his family. In the 1940s and 1950s, how a husband dressed when he left the house in the morning was inseparable from the dignity of his household. A man who maintained his appearance was understood, without anyone saying it directly, to be a man who took his responsibilities seriously. His wife understood this. His children understood this. His neighbors understood this, without a single word being spoken about it. There is a moment that captures this better than any description. Picture a steelworker in Pittsburgh in 1951. On his day off, walking his daughter to her first day of school. He works in the mill 5 days a week. His hands are rough. His wages are ordinary. But that morning he is in his good suit, hat at exactly the right angle, shoes polished. He is not dressing for a job interview. He is dressing because this moment matters, because his daughter's first day of school matters, because she deserves to have a father who looks like the occasion means something to him. That understanding, that how you dress is a form of respect you extend to the people around you, and not just a signal you send about yourself, is something that has been almost entirely lost. The suit was a gift, worn outward. Then came the war. In 1942, the U.S. War Production Board issued Regulation L-85. It restricted the use of wool and other fabrics for civilian clothing in order to conserve material for military uniforms. Suits got simpler almost overnight. No more double-breasted jackets with their extra panels of fabric. No cuffs on trousers. Narrower lapels. Shorter jacket lengths. The government had, by law, made the suit leaner, plainer, less of a production. Walk down that same Chicago street in 1944 instead of 1955, and the suits are still there. But something about them has changed. There is less to them. And the men wearing them have quietly absorbed a new idea without anyone announcing it. Formality is negotiable. For the first time in a generation, an entire country of men had gotten used to dressing with less, not because they chose to, because the government had asked them to. And the country had still functioned. The factories still ran, the offices still opened, the streets still filled every morning with men going to work. The suit had always represented abundance. Effort, care, wartime rationing quietly taught an entire generation that you could dress for function instead of status, and nothing essential would fall apart. That idea didn't disappear when the war ended. It just sat there, waiting. It didn't have to wait long. The late 1960s arrived and brought with them something the suit had never faced before. Not competition. Rejection. The generation that came of age during Vietnam wasn't just uninterested in the suit. They were actively opposed to it. The suit, in the cultural language of 1967 and 1968, wasn't just clothing anymore. It was a symbol of corporate conformity, of the establishment, of everything a generation had decided it wanted no part of. Woodstock in 1969 put it on film for the whole country to see. Nearly 500,000 young Americans choosing denim and flannel and bare feet over anything with a lapel. And the message wasn't just about fashion. It was philosophical. We reject what you stand for, and we will prove it by rejecting what you wear. The counterculture didn't finish the suit on its own. Most of those young people eventually went to work in offices and put the jacket back on. But they introduced something into the American cultural conversation that had never been there before. The idea that formality was a choice, not a requirement, that you could be serious, even successful, without performing the rituals that seriousness had always demanded. That idea planted itself in 1968. It grew slowly, quietly, through every decade that followed. until the moment a man in a black turtleneck stood on a stage in Silicon Valley and finished what the counterculture had started.
Through the 1980s and into the 1990s, a new industry was quietly rewriting what serious looked like. Tech companies, many of them led by men who had grown up during the counterculture years, started selling a new message. The suit didn't mean disciplined and successful anymore. It meant corporate, rigid, old-fashioned, maybe even a little untrustworthy, like you were hiding something important behind the formality. The most visible symbol of this shift wasn't an advertisement or a policy. It was a single man. Steve Jobs stood on stages in front of millions of people in a black turtleneck and Levi's jeans, running the most valuable company in the world, and the message was as clear as anything ever broadcast on television. The rules have changed, and these are the new ones. Companies like IBM, which had required white shirts and dark suits as an absolute, unbreakable standard for decades, formally relaxed their dress codes in the 1990s. And around the same time, a phrase entered the American workplace that would change everything: Casual Friday. Originally, it was a small thing, 1 day a week, a limited exception, a minor concession to employee comfort. Within a decade, for enormous portions of the American workforce, casual had stopped being the exception. It became the whole week. Millions of people believed the new message. If the most successful, most innovative people in the most dynamic industry in the country were wearing comfortable clothes to board meetings, why would anyone else bother with a necktie?
Here is the detail that almost nobody talks about, the thing that actually changes how you see all of this. The suit had rules, a code. There was a correct way and an incorrect way to wear one. Lapel width relative to tie width. How much shirt cuff should show below the jacket sleeve, exactly ½ an inch, no more. Sock length, trouser break, what colors paired with what occasions and what times of day. You could absolutely get it wrong, and people would notice, and the noticing mattered. That structure, that discipline, was the entire point. It forced a kind of daily intentionality that modern dressing almost never requires. Every morning, a man in 1955 made a series of conscious decisions about how he was presenting himself to the world. Each decision was shaped by a code he had inherited and understood, and living inside that code, day after day, year after year, quietly shaped something about how he carried himself, how he sat in meetings, how he walked into a room, how he spoke to people he had just met. And what replaced it has almost no rules at all. You cannot be dressed wrong in comfortable clothing. There is no code to violate, no tradition to uphold, no decision that requires real thought or intention. The suit demanded something from you every single morning before you left the house. Modern casual dressing asks for almost nothing, and that absence of structure, of intention, of any agreed-upon visual language of respect between men is what actually got lost. Not the wool, not the lapels. The discipline underneath. Do you still own a suit? And when was the last time you actually wore one for something other than a wedding or a funeral? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. And if stories like this interest you, tell me what parts of classic America you'd like to see explored next. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time.